Thank you for Eric to setting this for us. Hello everyone, welcome to this very special section we call Spotlight section, and I'm Louis Liu from Yat-Sen University, and currently I'm the editor-in-chief of Regional Study and Regional Science, which is one of the youngest journal under the RSA community. And this is my first time to organize this section after taking over the position of EIC. So I'm very honored to invite one of the most influential contributor and scholar in our journal, Professor Markku Sotarauta from Finland University to you. I know those are rock things, so sorry for that. So I think many of you here already know Professor Sotarauta very well, but I still want to take a few minutes to introduce what he contributions to regional study and regional science. Professor Sotarauta already a very well-known scholar in regional development, regional transformation, leadership, and specialization, and so on. And particularly, he is one of the major contributors to the inaugurate volume of this journal established in 2014. And also, one of his paper, specialization, is become the top cited article in our journal. And after a year, Professor contribute a lot of paper, not just in the very beginning. That is what I very respected. I think he already published more than 5 papers in RSRS, and many of them are the most high-cited paper in our journal. And more than that, upon this journal and his other works, he has already developed a strong trend of study of regional leadership, entrepreneurship, regional transformation, and invoke a lot of young scholars like me and the other. So I think few scholars better to fit today's topic about seeing the unseen in regional study. And this lecture is specific designed not only to share what his recent and previous study, and more important, want to prospect what the future that regional study can go for the young scholar and even a PhD student here. And so that is what we designed to present here, this very special lecture. And different from the plenary speak lecture, I arranged one discussion and one respondent for this lecture. The discussion is Professor Pedro Amaral, and he's also the deputy head of the EIC of my journal. I will introduce him later on. And the respondent is Dr. Huang from Peking University. I also will introduce her later on. So first, let's welcome Professor Sotarauta for his lecture. Yeah, in between.
I know my borders here. Thank you very much for the introduction. For a Finn, those of you who know Finland know that when somebody praises us, we get flushed and we think that that's not real. It's a sales talk. And you may have heard that Finland has been the happiest country in the world for, I don't know, 7-8 times in a row. What is the discussion in Finland? Indicators are wrong. Who did that study? Can't be true. So I felt like that's just a moment ago. But thank you very much for the journal for the invitation. The invitation was challenging, so to say. These were the questions that were sent to me by email. If you could say something about these things. Where is regional studies heading conceptually? I of course know that it's a broad scheme and you can select what you want to do. Important questions, impossible questions. And those of who I've been working with know quite well that I'm not Dr. What. I'm either Dr. Who is my favorite on TV. Dr. Who is great. I am Dr. How. I'm always asking how questions, basically. And I will tell you why soon. So also my answer is about how instead of what and where we are heading, etc., etc. And then I was also asked to say something to help the early career scholars to navigate and contribute to an increasing complex intellectual landscape. What can I say? This is exactly the same question for me and Henry and David and Markus and everybody, Robert here. We don't know, basically. But what I know, that this is the best possible time to be a scholar. Institutions are changing, geopolitics is changing, regional development patterns are changing. And back home at Tampere University, I usually say to students that you are in a brilliant position. You are part of an emerging trend that is shaping the future for decades, potentially. Who knows? And when you get home, then you can be worried, because we should be worried. But at work, this is great. And this is kind of my standpoint, and what I'm trying to talk about is how to build individual capacity to see the unseen. My approach is I will use some personal experiences just to highlight that what I'm saying is not just an invention. But I think we know quite well that sciences, social sciences are evolving. It's a cumulative process. We are adding new questions, new methods, seldom new methods, but still it's not the thing that somebody sees the future and then we start doing it. It's more like we come together in conferences, we talk and talk and talk, and next year we'll meet again and we realize that we are talking about the same issues again and again and again. And I've been a member of RSA since 1998, and that's my feeling. We come together and we evolve very slowly. But personal level, there are changes, I hope. And that's why I hope to say something sensible about how to find generative questions at personal level that might feed into research questions without us even realizing it, or the colleagues knowing that there are something behind our thinking. One thing I've been working on quite a lot with Andrew Beer, who is sitting in the audience, is place-based leadership, place leadership, etc. And why did it take so long us to acknowledge that there is such a thing as place-based leadership? This is from our book we edited with Andrew a few years ago, how the number of publications started to amount 25 years ago, roughly. Somewhere here, there are a lot of studies, Michael Parkinson from Liverpool especially, concluding that leadership is important. There were OECD reports saying that the problem was lack of leadership. But in our community, there was basically nobody, virtually nobody studying leadership or management issues. But then it took up very fast. And the reason is that the phenomenon was there. Many of us knew that there is something we should know more about. It was not lack of data or lack of theory, as we like to say. It was more like structural in our field or cognitive. We simply didn't see it. When I started talking about leadership-related issues in RSA conferences 26, 28 years ago, these are actual comments. Are you some kind of political scientist? What are you doing here? And this is, as you may guess, this is a little bit an insult in this community. Are you a management guy? And I said, yes. So, and regional development is not about individuals. That came through all the time. It's collective, structural, programs, policies, etc. And after a series of place leadership studies, we agree on that. But by studying leadership processes, we can learn quite a lot about regional development we haven't seen before, because it's a different lens. Nothing dramatic. This is 1990. You remember dinosaurs, some flying, and myself graduating from the university. Before that, I was a trainee in the state regional office of southern Finland. And there was a really brilliant boss of mine who was very keen on having long conversations about regional development policy, what's wrong, what's good, and so forth. One day he came to me and said, have you thought about your master's thesis? And I said, yeah, self-reliance, reasons, something like that. No. Here is a pile of books for you. It's about strategic planning. And in late 80s, that was something we didn't discuss in Finland or Europe at all. And I read the books in few days. I wanted to impress him. And then we had long discussions, and I ended up writing about it. I was commissioned by the state office and one municipality to write a strategy for one rural municipality. I realized that strategic planning and thinking I had read about had almost nothing to do what I saw in practice. There was a mismatch. I came back to the university, started focusing on network management, information management, knowledge management, and later place leadership. And we, 19 years ago, made an extensive empirical study on interviewing people, doing a survey on what people do. Not about leadership or management, but the question was what the regional development practitioners do. And it was that they are leading processes at grassroots level. It was not called leadership, but they were mobilizing things, they were influencing how people think. And I realized this is exactly what I did in that small municipality. I had all the what questions, but I had no idea how to do it. And then the only answer is start talking to people, meet everybody, learn and listen, and find a way how to mobilize those who don't want to be mobilized. And we had a nice collaboration with the business development director of that municipality. I'm a city boy. I was born in a city, have always lived in a city, except that 2 years in rural Finland. I was the bad guy. I said all those things that are not supposed to be said aloud. And some people didn't like me. Some cheered. Finally somebody is saying that we are inward-looking small community and all related to that. And then my colleague, the business development director, went to different meetings and said, don't worry about him, he's a city boy. No. He's from Turku. If you were Finnish, you know what that means. It's like in Norway and saying somebody's from Bergen. Same kind of thing. Or in UK, he's from Oxford. And he said things like that. But have you thought about? And then they came up with solutions. So I was the provocation. He was the launch of finding solutions. And I thought, why haven't we theorized this? And then I met Andrew Pierre, John Gibney, Joyce Liddell, Lumina Horlings, many people who had same kind of questions from the Agder community, let's put it that way. And then the community started to emerge. And that's crucial. If something unseen is becoming seen, it's not individual thing. You need people from all over the world to talk with, to write about it, to think about it. And I especially remember Andrew in one conference once saying that place-based leadership is like Higgs boson in physics. We all talk about it, but nobody has seen it. And then over a cup of coffee we were inventing leadership collider or something like that, but we didn't go there. But yet, this is just an example. We have quite a lot of questions that are not asked. We simply don't talk about them. They are unsayable. They may be politically awkward. They may be normatively destabilizing. Conclusion, no money if you applied money, if somebody gets angry with you, kind of things. They are experienced, not theorized. That's our work, to theorize what is seen but not theorized yet. Isn't that our work, basically? And visible to only some people, peripheral regions, gender issues there, or sometimes in policy making you have people who have been silenced, not political reasons, simply they are not credible, people are not listening to them. So there are many kind of voices that are unheard of. And quite often we hear that there are no methods. Well, theorize it and then we start experimenting with methods, or study them, or borrow them from neighboring disciplines, or whatever. Sometimes they are too futures-oriented. I used to work at the Finland Futures Research Center. That was also the dinosaurs' time. There is a rich literature on futures, how to study futures. We should borrow that also. There is a lot to learn. Then another issue. I just came across one article. I don't know if it's a good one or bad one, but it has an interesting message if we think about how to move beyond, how to see the unseen. And in this study, they studied social sciences. The main categories of social science is psychology, economics and business, educational science, sociology, law, political science, and social and economic geography, media and communication, and then the rest. And they had the period in the 1960s, and then from 2010 to 2014. And does it say there? They studied over 4 million publications to see what has happened. And what is interesting in a way is that they categorize these broad disciplines like that they are exporter or independent fields: economics, sociology, law, political science. If you know economists, they are not learning, they are exporting. I buy that. I know quite a lot of political scientists in Finland. Yeah. And perhaps you have also realized that social economic geography is one of the importing disciplines. The biggest one in this study. It has increased the most, and we are importing concepts more than any other discipline. That's great, I would say. But if you do it too much, it's not great anymore. The question is about the balance. But the result of this study was that social sciences, especially the importer fields, are expanding, but still they have the knowledge core. And that's important. Learn from the others, but have the core. My guess is that you, me, many people are mainly searching for influence from economics, of course, especially the economic geographers. That's the well-known long tradition between those two disciplines: sociology, political science, the exporter fields. I have learned a lot by reading management studies, organizational studies, leadership studies. They are not applicable as such. But what is interesting at the moment is that the leadership community have realized that they should focus more on relational leadership instead of focusing on individual leaders. This is what we have been doing all the time. And they are all, that's the nature of our discipline. And now they have even realized that it might be useful to read what those place-based leadership people have written, because they have conceptualized the things they are struggling with. This is not a trend. It's more like weak signals. How about history, social psychology? I used to have 2 colleagues at our department who were quite heavily reliant on social psychology in village development, rural development, quite a lot there. I have been reviewing quite a lot of studies that say that they are narrative studies. Why those studies don't use the narrative scholarship? There is a lot of people studying narration in literature, but also in politics, policy making, etc. And apologies for all those whose papers have been published, I may have reviewed, but most of the studies are not about narratives. They are about conventional interviews that are presented as a narrative, but they are not studies of narrative. And here could be a lot to use. Import, reconceptualize, as are in future studies, sometimes in science fiction. But sometimes we are reinventing the wheel, and of course, it pays well in citations if you can say that I am the first. You get more citations than if you say that, there are hundreds of papers and I'm just reapplying and rethinking it to fit our field. But the latter is more important, basically. let's jump that. But a little bit about how to broaden our thinking, how to find generative questions, how to have individual level thought experiments. I'm not claiming that I'm Albert Einstein who can do thought experiments, but what I have learned is that playing inside your head is quite useful. Playing with ideas that may be translated into research questions quite well. I'll go back to my experiences in Ruovesi. 1991, I worked there for 2 years after I was commissioned to write the strategy, interview people, do statistical analysis. Then the municipal director called me, it's a nice paper you wrote, why don't you come up and implement it? And so did I. I worked there for 2 years, and that's perhaps the best 2 years in my professional life. Being a city boy, being in a rural Finland, it's a different world, but everything was in a miniature scope. Environmentalists here, the residents here, the politicians here, the conflicts between politicians over there, the micro businesses that were saying that we were supporting, I was the municipal officer at that time, that we are supporting too much the big industry. There was one company that was employing more than 300 that was fiercely against the strategy because they were worried about their labor. There will be competition. So basically what we see in local regional economic development were, for me, on a kind of a silver plate. After that, I went back to university. My master's thesis was published in our department series. And then I realized when I get back to the university that what I wrote here was so-called design school, classical school of strategic planning that fits very well in public sector thinking. This is what we are applying. The European Union, most governments, most municipalities, most regions are on classical strategic planning mode still. Need to have a vision here, strategic objectives, 10 objectives, and then you implement, and then you realize that it was not implemented, and then you blame the vision, it was not a good one, we need to have better consultants, and the cycle goes and goes and on and on and on. But we are in this kind of vision, strategic objective mode. It is good model, doesn't fit everything everywhere, and usually it is producing quite a lot of difficulties in multi-actor setting. Because what is the vision is the consensus we can come up with. And whenever there is a difficult question, we go around it and around it and around it. And then we have a vision that this region will be the most sustainable data center region in the world. And everybody is committed to that. And next Monday, when we have to start investing money or doing something, we realize that we have understood the practicalities differently. And this is where I started doing my PhD. I read about governance, household concept today, quite new in early 90s. Processual school of strategy coming from Minnesota University. Teesside in the UK, there were people doing quite brilliant studies on how to study processes, translate that into management literature, and then communicative planning in planning studies. Patsy Healy, John Forrester, Ture Sager, some of the older guys and girls may remember if you have been involved in planning studies. And this is a bad idea. Having business studies, planning studies, governance studies. Here comes my doctoral dissertation. And I realized myself that it's going quite well, that there are different layers. But what is the red thread going through it? What is uniting it, the uniting force? I always read a lot, and when I say a lot, I mean a lot, all the time. Novels, especially in the 90s, I visited Japan many times, and I read all the novels published in English or Finnish Japanese novels, including haiku, Matsuo Pasho, and some of the samurai stuff. And that was here, and my doctoral dissertation here. Then I got interested in the theory of haiku. Why they are as they are. I found some books explaining, that's very Western way of understanding Japanese haiku. You try to analyze it. I know the paradox here. But from there I learned that haikus are so appealing because they are simple. Public sector strategies rarely, at that time especially, were simple. They were very complex. You tried to be holistic, partly thanks to geographers who came around and said it must be a holistic view. And then you try to make it holistic. And then it's so complex that nobody knows what is the long-term view, what should be done persistently, consistently, and so forth. And they should be transient, fading away. Regional development strategies are there to stay. They're rigid, not transient. And then I also learned that haikus are asymmetrical, serving different groups differently. And then I realized that I'm writing a haiku strategy book. Of course, this is my PhD. I didn't cite this word, but it influenced my thinking that I have to rethink what I had read from processual governance, etc. That I could think, what is a simple, transient, asymmetrical strategy for regional development and local government? If you were able to read Finnish, it's in Finnish, you wouldn't find that. But if you knew some of this stuff, you would. And then I also read the book of 5 Rings by Musashi Miyamoto, perhaps the most famous samurai. And my dissertation is not in chapters, but there is 5 rings. Because I realized that these themes, the 3 themes, the main themes are not connected. I said they are not connected. They are rings that are leading us to simplicity, transcendence, etc., etc. Yeah, I'll come back to that. But this is my way of learning something for my work. It was quite well received. The one pre-examiner, we always have 2 pre-examiners. One said that this is an impossible. He can't examine it. It doesn't start, it doesn't stop. It's just flowing. He can't grade it. And the other one said, this is the best book I have ever read. And there was I in the middle. And this is, I enjoyed that because I somehow felt that if you do something significant, it should create something like that. And Finland in the 90s was very happy with that kind of work. I'm not sure if it's anymore. Another quick example, I've been reading also science fiction. One of my favorites is, I don't know how to pronounce it, it's in something Liu Cixin. Yeah, you heard who?
Famous science fiction book in China currently.
Oh, the trilogy, yeah. 3 books. I recommend it. It's a great story, absolutely great. I read it when it was published last year. I listened to it as an audio book, and I was stuck with cosmic sociology. There is a discipline like that. It's playing a central role in the book, and I don't read what are the axioms of cosmic sociology. But then you also need the acceptance of 2 other considerations to analyze the cosmic society, the whole space and the whole potential civilizations there. And I was stuck with the concept of chain of suspicion. I say nothing more about that because I start thinking about it and hopefully publish something next year. It's up and coming. I don't know what kind of shape it will take. But then I realized that if you think about investments, big decisions, what is happening behind those decisions, there is a chain of suspicion. We haven't studied this kind of chains of suspicion. That might explain why nothing is happening even though we have such a nice strategy. Hopefully I can get my head around this thing, and it may take completely different shape. But this trilogy opened several good questions. And of course, this thing is based on Fermi paradox. And then we are borrowing here and there, so it's coming from the physics, put in the shape of science fiction and so forth. One thing I'm quite often asking myself is that, especially looking at the Finnish cities, why they all are embedded in the same governance structure, same institutions. Finland is quite homogeneous place. Yeah, we can identify the differences in structures, in human capital, especially the universities, what kind of businesses, etc. But still the rhythms of not decision making only, not investments only, but how things evolve in those places so different from place to place. Why is that? What makes the rhythm of the city? I can't answer it, but this is the thing. I was born in Turku, the old capital, the oldest town in Finland, and it has been so slow. Compared to Tampere, where I live, that's the kind of a Manchester of Finland, the old industrial town that is making decisions and something is happening. They are fighting and all those things, but still the decisions are made. Usually public-private collaboration. 6 weeks ago, municipality, the City Council of Turku made the decision to invest quite a lot of money in a new tram system. I think it was 15 years ago when Tampere and Turku decided to do it together, to purchase the trains and everything together. We have had in Tampere the train system, I don't know, 6-7 years. Same starting point, roughly the same size of cities. Someplace all the time something is happening. Some other place, it's really difficult. You get the impression every move is like some kind of miniature conflict in place. In some other places you have the miniature conflicts, but still you move on. Why is that? Why are the rhythms different? Just one examples of temporal blind spots. Again, an example back home, we have had a huge social and health system reform. Municipalities used to be responsible for health and social services. It was moved to regional level, and it's now more ministry guided and government guided, more top down, even though there is kind of mock regional council. So how would you say that? And of course, also all the Finnish universities are somehow involved in studying, advising, consulting that reform. Because it's the biggest administrative reform we have had ever. And of course, the academics also are divided. There are people who, simplifying a lot now, who say more money from the state and everything will be fine. And then there are people who say that it solves nothing because it's badly managed, poorly organized, there are overlaps. Don't give them more money, force them to renew themselves. And different positions in between. I'm not involved in that, that's not my cup of tea, but I have tried to encourage my colleagues who are very much in this field to organize workshops where they take the opposite views and make them argue. It doesn't happen in the Nordic countries. You can't have those kind of open debates that this is my position, this is my argument based on this kind of things, and then you have somebody who has a completely opposing view. It's so difficult. You can invite those people, then they sit in the panel, and you have an excellent view, by the way, and I endorse it, but there is a small nuances I would like to discuss. It's really difficult in the academic context and in the policy context to have these kind of open debates. Sweden is even worse than Finland, trust me. We are so consensual because the Nordic countries are based on this kind of social capital, consensual thinking, and we have been doing well because of that. It's very good for implementation. It's not good for transformation and renewal and radical innovation. End of story. I can't prove myself with empirical studies, but if you look a lot of empirical studies, you would find it. And then we have people like Anneli Saxenian earlier came to Finland and said that your whole innovation system is about tinkering. It's so incremental, so processual. And basically the Finns were tried not to publish her and Charles Sable's report, arguing that we are what we actually are. Processual. Why? Because we have social capital and we don't want to upset anybody. And you can see it in the industry, you can see it in policy making, you can see it in the universities, and that's nice as long as we all know what is the route to the future, then we can implement it. But if it's wrong, we all are wrong at the same time, and that's not good. You can trust me. But organizing these kind of cross-disciplinary frictions could open new kind of generative questions for consensual countries. I know that some other countries struggle with the conflicts and would like to have a consensual thinking. I know that, but in the morning session there were something about voiceless. I don't go there. Just one thing. This is so Anglophone world. Coming from Finland, small country, 5.6 million, we quite often have to reinvent what we have done for a long time ago, just to fit in the academic literature, journals, etc. Because they will not be accepted if we argue our case as we would in Finland, in Finnish. You all know Adam Smith, Invisible Hand, and all that. Anders Chydenius from Finland. Finland was part of Sweden at that time, so all the Swedes would say that he was Swedish, but from the Finnish side of Sweden, anyway, from Kokkola. Basically wrote about exactly same, well, not exactly, but same kind of things. But of course it's not known because he didn't have the medium that English-speaking people have. That is the publishing and everything, it's kind of amplifying everything you do. And that's why we from small countries so happily subscribe to Anglophone world, because we also want to have the megaphone you have, even though it's not our language, but still. Then I have learned that Ibn Khaldun in the 14th century has written basically the invisible hand argument already, but that's in the Arabic countries, so it's not for us, something. And then Sherlock Holmes, of course, and the very famous quote from a book, Silver Place. The inspector from Scotland Yard is asking, is there any other point you would wish to draw my attention to? Yeah, there is the incident of the dog in the night time, but the dog did nothing. That was the curious incident in that book. It revealed do we have anomalies in our field? Things that are not barking so that we would see them. Are there cats that are barking but we don't recognize them because cats don't bark? That's why we focus only on the dogs, if you get the picture. We have a very strange place in Finland, some 400 kilometers from Helsinki to northwest, 200 kilometers from Tampere, that is the second city region, called Brothers Keskinen, in the village of Tuuri. It's second biggest department store in Finland, in middle of nowhere, completely. And around it has been growing and growing and growing, and there's a mock castle and all sorts of crazy things. And once the owner got married to an African princess, next he was married to a Brazilian samba dancer, and in the media all the time. And if you try to explain that place and how it has grown, nothing we have studied can explain it. I visited there once. The Finnish National Broadcasting Company made kind of a morning TV show there, and then the journalist or the reporter asked me that how long this place can grow, because it's such an anomaly, crazy place. And I said, nobody knows. We haven't studied it, but the question is not about growth. It's about story. It's bold and beautiful. As long as there is experiences, people go there, especially in summertime, shopping, they spend the night there, they go singing, karaoke. Most of you wouldn't like that place, I guess. But still, It's experience economy. If you read experience economy thesis, it explains perfectly why it's doing so well. And I then, that's a long time ago, I met the owner of the place, and he said, now I'm thinking about the next change in the plot. Because people are so used to what we are, I have to invent something. And then he started building the mock castle and all sorts of things. And he wrote many of the articles for tabloids by himself. He paid extra money for his staff to send all sorts of hints to Finnish tabloids. Now, we saw the famous people here, and when they can't reinvent the story, add new villains or heroes or strange happenings, that place will die. But the experience economy explains it. And I would say that it was the dog that didn't bark, as in a way we are used to, but it was more like a cat that did. But we don't study anomalies like that. That are going beyond our explanations. Except we did one study in the Nordic countries where we identified the outliers, and then we focused on the outliers. And that opened new questions and answers, and that was quite useful with Markus Grillitz and Rune Fitjar from Stavanger and so forth. But what are the invariances? We are talking a lot about change agency, of course, and regional development is about change. We are trying to change the regions for good, whatever it means. We don't study so much invariances. What is not changing behind the structures, policies, etc., that are not changing? As I started by saying that the RSA conferences are nice, I love to come back, still I feel like I have been here before. Because it's so gradual, and that's okay. What are the invariants in regional development theories or policies? That would be a good study. What has not changed when we goes back to reproductive agency also and maintenance agency, because most of the people are maintaining the system, whatever it is. What is it that they are maintaining? I'm not talking about path dependency or lock-in as such, but what is explaining path dependency and lock-in at micro levels. Perhaps somebody will someday do an invariance analysis. One more thing, and then I conclude to inform the chairman. One thing I have used a lot in different kinds of training sessions with policymakers from municipalities, regions, ministries, all sorts of players is the elimination analysis. What if you didn't exist? Who would cry tomorrow? What if Regional Studies Association would be closed next Monday? What would happen? Or what if the Finnish local government would be closed completely? It's just a thought experiment. What if the universities were closed? Or whatever. Usually people react like, well, it's in the constitution, the role of local government. So it is, but let's play with the thought. Who needs you? And if it's not you, who would organize these kind of processes? Just a thought experiment. In working at the Finnish University, and all the who are from Finland know that we have been gone through a lot of reforms, but we also have a lot of invariances. So it's the faculties that are changing the university structures, but I teach the same courses as ever in the same way, and as I like to do. That's one good example. Is invariance is a university. Is it good or bad? But we are very good at maneuvering through all sorts of changes. What if somebody closed our faculty? Faculty of Management and Business, some 1,000 graduates every year, masters, bachelors combined, 60% masters. Well, some other universities in Finland would be happy. They would take up us. What if all the business schools were closed? What would happen? These kind of questions, they are nice. To start a research or regional development agencies. We have especially municipal development agencies where several municipalities have organized themselves to have a local development agency. What if that is closed? I would say that in 2 years people wouldn't even remember them, because somebody else would fill in that void. Still, most of them are doing good work, but it's very invisible. I also would like to recommend everybody to think without concepts sometimes. How things flow through our systems without having, it's difficult, I know, because we are embedded in our theoretical frameworks. But just thinking new policy, company planning to close a plant in your region, what happens? In one study on place leadership in 6 countries, we organized this kind of vignette focus group sessions where we asked people to imagine, to tell, you heard that that company with 2,000 employees is seeking place in Northern Europe. Where would you hear about that? And then we tried to simulate the process. What happens and what happens next and so forth. It was quite nice because then we realized that, for example, in Tampere, the mayor was not at all important because mayor is the one who provides authority services if needed. In Italy, nothing happened without mayors first saying that this is where we go. In Finland, it would have happened without mayor anyway, because one day he and council would have been in a position that they just have to provide land for the company, whatever. But these kind of things where you start looking very inductively and then bringing in your concepts when you have identified how the process flows through the system is quite useful. And then you realize that, yeah, local important, regional important, national important, Europe important, so far it's not spatial, it's a kind of the flow of activities that is interesting. Let's jump that. This is the last, if I remember correctly, the position of an investigator. Nowadays, it's fashionable to say that we have a position and it's an ethical declaration. That's fine, but what I'm here saying is that the position we are at is an epistemological resource. That's teaching us how others think. As I said, I used to collaborate a lot with Finnish cities, ministries, Finnish parliament. Then after 10 years ago, I get a little bored about that because there's more or less same people asking same questions, same kind of fights, having discussions how to increase the collaboration between ministries. Has been on the agenda for an eternity. Luckily, I got several positions in the financial sector, and at the moment I'm a member of the board in the market-leading financial company in Finland, and that has been perfect to see it from the perspective of money and insurance. And it's a cooperative. That's main mission is to support regional development in the regions. It's a 40-something independent cooperatives that come together and form a group. And the thinking is a combination of regional development and money and all the difficulties with the regional polarization and all that. But it has been very fruitful to find positions outside the academic sphere, but not to stay there forever, because then if you do that, you become part of the structure. You end up having a political position without knowing that you have a political position. That's awkward, I can tell you. That's one of the reasons why I faded away from the Finnish system as a kind of a consulting researcher to some extent. You start realizing that you have a political position. No way, I don't have one. Conclusion, thought experiments are fun, they are useful. They are not translated directly into research or research questions, but they can open up the thinking. And we can develop a systematic view of detecting the blind spots. I have not consciously created it, but I would say that since I learned to read, that's what I have been doing and continue doing. I read and read and read and read. I simply love novels, and that's the basis of my reading. Detecting blind spots and getting some new insight. Some other people have some other kinds of means. But this is the main point, perhaps: the identifying the unseen question, seeing beyond the scene, is not so much of cognitive challenge, because most of the people talk about the same issues. And guess what? Those people who have institutional courage to test the journal, test the conference, test the audience, got those ideas from you. From coffee tables, lunch tables, I heard you had the Nordic Midsummer Festival yesterday. I wasn't there, but some parts of Finland share that tradition. I don't know yet if I like it or not, but we have that tradition. But we are also gaining insight from each others. And if you talk to me and I go home and it was a good point, has anybody studied it? And then I start doing it before you do it. If it fits in my research agenda. But that's why the thought experiments can be fun and useful, because that helps you to be on the radar beyond what you are doing at the moment. Most people focus on their PhD, next publication, but it's always useful to think the next phase after that. Thank you for your patience. Hopefully this was more useful than not. At least it was not the normal stuff, what I usually do, but this is what I do almost on a daily basis. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And actually, this kind of research and thinking is what my journal wanting. And it took me a lot of time to understand what professor want to talk about. But I share a lot of similar feeling and even resonate with many of your points, because I'm struggling with the business management, economic. I'm in the faculty of economic management, so I have a lot of feeling with you that how we communicate sometimes resist because they are more forceful, and try to explain what we are doing and how valuable we are. But I want to save time for the discussion and if we got time in the end, I will speak more. And now we sincerely invite the first discussion. My colleague allowed me to read my note, because then I want to introduce you more correctly. And Professor Pedro Amaral is the Deputy Editor-in-Chief in Regional Study and Regional Science in my journal. And he's an Associate Professor at the Federal University of Minas Gerais in Brazil. Yeah, correct, right? And he has been part of the RSA editorial team much longer than me, and over 10 years, I think. Yeah, over 10 years. And he also received a lot of awards recently, very recently. And one is that the Distinguished Service to Regional Study Award in 2023, and Honorary Lifetime Membership of RSA in 2025. And most recently, he also received the RSAI Peter Nikam Research Encouragement Award for his outstanding contributor to regional science. I haven't get any of them, so I try my best to catch up with him. So I learned a lot from him when I start to work with the RSRS. So I'm very honored and very happy that he will be here to share his thought and opinion to Professor Sotarouta's wonderful speech. Welcome.
Well, thank you, Louis, for such a generous introduction, and thank you so much, Markku, for such a thought-provoking presentation. There were some topics that Markku presented today that really ring the bell, and I kept thinking about them, and I'm really thankful that Louis forwarded me the presentation earlier this morning so I could look at it a bit earlier. And one of the things is that when we think about what Markku presented us, it's basically trying to think beyond the idea of, like filling research gaps, and more also about thinking how our strong beliefs or how, like the way we usually do the things.
I think you have to follow the principle.
Oh, sorry, I have to be within, sorry. So how all these things, they kind of work as filtering mechanisms, right? And that filter out maybe things or in questions that are hiding quite in front of us. And so we need to try to step back and think more about how we can work our way around these filtering mechanisms and try to see the unseen, right? So these are quite interesting ideas, and I'm really glad that Markku really focused a lot on the house, as he said in the beginning. I mean, it's easier said than done, but at least, right, the steps and some of the house are there. And it really resonates with me with what John Harrison said yesterday when he was discussing Ron's presentation as well, and that he focused on the who. So like we're kind of on the regional grammar studies somehow, like the who's and hows and you know all the questions. But I mean it's different way to think about these things, right? So I found all that very interesting, and the whole idea of working with or trying to find the generative questions instead of the familiar ones, as Markku said that, I mean, every time RSA conferences and the conference that we attend, they seem too familiar, right? So we need to try to find that one step ahead and try to find these generative questions. When I was thinking about these too familiar, I remember of a poem of my favorite Brazilian poet. She's named Adélia Prado. If you excuse me, I'll first say, it's a very short one. I'll say it in Portuguese first, because of course it sounds better, but then I'll say it in English as well. So she says that, minha mãe cozinhava exatamente arroz, feijão roxinho, molho de batatinhas, mas cantava. So in English, what she said was, my mother cooked precisely rice, red beans, and a little potato gravy. But she sang. So I think this is kind of the message that I'm getting from Markku. At least it really resonated to me like that, that we have a lot of familiar things that we do every day, right? Or familiar questions that we visit every day. But how can we, you know, look at these things from a different perspective? So it's not about, you know, the cooking everyday meal. It's about what it's unseen, like what music is being playing or how everything is being playing around these. So one of the topics that Markku presented, and I really would like maybe to hear a bit more about it, is the temporal blind spots. So when we think about this in regional studies, we sometimes call each other, or at least we hear people calling each other a lot, or the work of each other that, well, you know, this is old wine in a new bottle, right? We all have heard this expression many times before. So if we think about place leadership, some people may argue, oh, you know, it's just a new word for growth poles. Or when we think about clusters or smart specialization or cluster policies, people may say, well, it's just Marshallian districts all over again. So how much, or how can we distinguish between, you know, what is old wine or what is actually another way to try to find a blind spots that we had when all these theories and all these questions actually first appeared. So basically how much is just revisiting and how much is finding new places in the theories or in the familiar questions that we oftentimes already face. And another thing that I kept thinking about when I was checking Markku's presentation and now hearing what he was presenting was about the invisible topics. I mean, I'm Brazilian, based in Brazil, so I know how to be invisible in these kind of things, right, in our research. And then I thought about another expression, in addition to, you know, the who, the how. I was like, when I was thinking about invisible topics, I was thinking, well, invisible where? Because some of the topics that are considered invisible here, or in the Anglophonic academic world, they are not elsewhere. So, for example, if I check a literature here about territorial control by non-state actors, this is, I mean, kind of an invisible topic when we think about it in the standard English literature, or, you know, like health and infrastructure access in violently contested spaces, or long-term extractive path dependency. These are research agendas that are quite common in other languages, right? In Spanish or Portuguese, because at least, I mean, I'm only seeing from my Latin American perspective. Of course, there must be some other also very intense topics in I don't know, Western studies or whatever, that are invisible, but only for the audience, right? So some specific audiences. So it's really interesting to try to think about this perspective and how maybe we can think about merging all these things. So how can these like topics like this, how can they be voiced in central places as like what we have here now, when the problems that are dealt with in these realities, they don't really resonate, right? I mean, why would we, in, you know, English literature, why would we be discussing again contested areas or maybe long-term path dependence. It's not something that it really resonates with the reality. So I try to think about how we can merge all these ideas and how we can make this like the forum and the stage that we have suitable for these type of topics as well. So the idea is not only about, I guess, thinking about these invisible topics or making them visible or finding these unseen, but also trying to find what would be the right or the correct stage for these ideas, and maybe also trying to find the right tune for them. And I remember, I think Andrew was the chair of RSA when Area Development and Policy was released, right, Andrew? It was quite at the time that, and I was discussing this with Sally because, as Louis said, I've been in editorial boards for RSA, I think, for 14 or 15 years now. Since I left my PhD, Bernie Fingleton invited me to be an early career editor for spatial economic analysis. So, I mean, I see some early career here as well. So that is a great way to join, editorial boards and the editorial activity at RSA. But sometimes they don't let you go anymore, so keep that in mind, that they may keep you for a while. But anyway, so bringing back to what I was going to say, the idea of finding the right tune is also really hard, and I think that was the reasoning, and Andrew may correct me if I don't remember well, the main reason for the launch of the Area Development and Policy journal, right? The idea that some research in regional studies is made elsewhere or in different places, not central places, but the way the papers are created, or at least the narratives and how they are constructed, are so different that they don't find a way into central journals, right? And then that was the idea, to try to allow for this diversity. And that is not easy. So in all these years working in RSA journals, I've seen so many times papers from Latin America, China, or Africa that were dealing with very important topics, and then the reviewers would say, well, you should revise this paper and show, like, make it more explicit how it will be of more interest for a broader international audience. I mean, I can get that. Of course, you need, to try to make it clear what is, like, the message, what you can learn from these more regional experiences and all of that. But not a single time I got that from a referee that was, evaluating a paper maybe on the fall of the cotton industry in Manchester. Like, no one asks why the cotton industry or the textile industry in Manchester is important for a broader international audience, right? And always, like, several times they would ask that about any of these different sectors or these different ideas. So I would just like really to congratulate Markku for the thought-provoking ideas that he's presenting, to thank him for making the house very clear in the presentation, and to keep our minds really working on this position, and if possible to hear a bit more on how you can see all this from this very different regional perspective, that it is not like trying to see the unseen in a central place, but kind of how to bring what you see in a different reality. How can you also try to bring that to a central stage such as what we have here? So once again, thank you so much, Markku.
Thank you, Pedro. And we welcome the next. She is we call respondent, not a discussion. As a young scholar learning from the lecture and report what she learned. And she's Dr. Huang Kaixuan from Peking University. And sorry for my selfness, because I know her very well, so I invite her to be the respondent. And particularly, her research currently is exactly echoing what Markku have said, seeing something unseen, because she is extending GPN study to service industry to look at hotel industry. So far as I know, when she set up the PhD title, send the paper for external review, and engage with different scholars, people will always ask, why look at hotel industry? Why not manufacturing, innovation? And she is struggling, and try to persuade people to understand that there are something that we have been ignored, haven't seen in hotel industry. So that is why I asked her to come. And she also should be recognized as the third generation of GPN study, right? the first generation is here, the second generation is here, and then she is the third. So I think this is the nuance point I want to make today to introduce her here. So welcome, Kaixuan.
Thank you, Luis, for the introduction, and thank you, Markku, for this stimulating and generous lecture. I feel both honored and challenged to respond as an early career scholar. Honored because your lecture speaks directly to many questions that my generation of scholar is dealing with, but also challenged because you ask us to do something that is simple to say but very difficult to practice, not only to fill the research gaps but also to see the questions that our existing frameworks have made difficult to see. And for me, for my own story, the most powerful message is that the unseen questions are not always the unknown questions. Very often, they are already present in practice and such as in experience, in marginal places, or in uncomfortable tensions, but they have not yet been accepted as proper research questions. And this is very important for the young scholars. We are trained to identify gaps, to position our work clearly, and to make it publishable, and so that we can answer these questions. And all this is necessary, but Markku reminds us that the most generative questions may not begin as the neat gaps. They often begin as the discomfort, as an anomaly, and as something that does not quite fit. And talking back to my own research, I think this resonates strongly with my own work on the global production networks in the hotel industry and my recent work in the AI industry. My early work on the international hotel groups in China started from a very simple paradox. In China, the high-end international hotels are often not very profitable, and the investment return period is long, and in many cities, the business logic is very weak. But the international five-star hotels have expanded very rapidly across the Chinese cities. So the puzzle is, if the international hotel is not a very profitable business in China, why do the international groups, the local governments, and the domestic investors continue to participate so actively? At the first glance, this may look like a hotel industry question, but for me, it becomes a regional development question. Because the existing studies often explain the hotel globalization through some firm strategies or value chain governance. But these are all very useful, but they do not fully explain why local governments and the state-owned enterprise in China are so deeply involved in introducing some international hotels to the Chinese cities. This unseen process the unseen process here was not simply some firm expansion questions. It was actually the strategic coupling between the global hotel brands, the local states' development ambitions, some land development issues, real estate interests, and the city branding. In other words, the hotel was not simply a business project for the Chinese cities. It's also an urban image project, a political achievement project, and a development project. The international hotel brand carries some symbolic value. It can help to raise the land and property values, improve the image of the city, and attract investments and signal some internationalization. That is exactly where Markku's point about tensions is helpful. If I have simply studied with the category of hotel globalization, I might have asked a very conventional question, such as how do the international hotel groups enter China? But if I study with this tension, the high-end hotels are financially weak, but they keep expanding. Then very different questions emerged. What hidden political economic mechanisms make this expansion possible? So that's my research question. And so one lesson I take from this lecture is that we should not organize research only around the sectors, territories, or policy instruments. We should also organize the research around the tensions. Tensions are often where the new theories begins. And the same also applies to my current research agenda on AI and the global production networks. The AI industry is usually discussed through some major hubs such as Silicon Valley, Beijing, Shenzhen, London, and Singapore. The dominant story is still one of the agglomeration, talent concentration, venture capital, and technological leadership. But when I look at some emerging cases in China, I found two phenomena that did not quite add up. The first is Qingyang. It's a very small city on the lowest plateaus of northwest China, and by many conventional standards, is a locationally disadvantaged place. And from the perspective of traditional economic geography, it should not be deeply integrated to the global production network. Yet, the city is now hosts a very large compute hub, powering the AI models worldwide. And the second is Yonghe. It's also a very small inland county in Shanxi, China, in the northwest part of China. We usually assume that the people working in the high-tech value chains are skilled workforce in big cities, but Yonghe's stay-at-home mothers, women once have little choice but to migrate for work or remain in some caregiving roles, would not be normally expected to take part in the high-tech value chains. But now these stay-at-home mothers, they are labeling data for major AI models around the world. So these two cases raise a question that has not been fully captured by the existing economic geography. Does the AI follow a spatial logic that are different from the manufacturing-based global production networks? So again, this is not only a gap in the literature, it's a tension between what our existing theories lead us to expect and what emerging realities seem to suggest. Traditional economic geography may lead us to expect some advanced digital industry to concentrate in some major innovation hub, but AI also depends on energy, compute infrastructure, data flows, platform control, and geopolitical constraints. And these inputs may create new opportunities for places that may not that was previously peripheral, such as the two cases, the Yonghe and Qingyang I mentioned before. So the question becomes: are we seeing a flattening of the core peripheral relations, or simply a new form of hierarchy? Are peripheral regions gaining new roles, or are they being inserted into the global production networks in low value and dependent positions? So are the new actors being included, or are the new inequalities are being reproduced in the new digital forms? So this means that the existing global production network theory remains extremely valuable, but it also needs to be stretched and adjusted. So perhaps this is what young scholars can contribute, not abandon the established theories, but to take them to some empirical sites where they become uncomfortable. But at the same time, there is also a practical challenge. Young scholars are evaluated by whether we can produce clear, answerable publishing papers. But generative questions are often messy at the beginning. They may be difficult to operationalize. They may not be immediately look like a clean contribution. They might even be easily misunderstood. So perhaps one question I would like to raise is, how can we create some academic spaces where early career scholars are allowed to stay with some difficult questions for longer? And how can journals, conference, and our senior scholars help the young researchers to develop questions that are not fully stabilized? And because if we award only some potential answers, as Markku want, we may lose some of the most important problems before they are even formulated. So to conclude, this lecture offers a useful reminder of my own work. In my hotel research, the unseen was the political economic mechanisms behind the service globalization. And in my AI research, the unseen may be the new spatial logic, the hidden labor, and infrastructure power behind the digital production. In both cases, the key was not simply to find a gap, but to start it from attention. So my main takeaway is that for young scholars, seeing the unseen means learning to trust the anomalies, to take uncomfortable empirical puzzles seriously, and to let the theory be disturbed by places, sectors, and actors that was not originally designed to explain. Thank you very much.
Who do you want to say something? We got 13 minutes left, so it's not questioning section. So if you're feeling good, you can say something, and then we can open the floor for more questions.
I try to be quick. I want to put myself and everybody on the ground again. I knew that I lifted everybody and myself, above the ground, but this is what the early Korea students should do: learn the basics, learn to jump through all the hoops and loops. And that's 99% of the work. I was more talking about the additional stuff, how you can differentiate yourself. And one example, during the last 20 years, I've been responsible for recruiting people especially to administrative studies unit at our faculty, some 90 people. A few weeks ago, we interviewed people for senior lectureship in public financial management. And that's a permanent position. It's kind of a postdoc position in a way. And basically everybody we interviewed were more or less the same, except one, who had beyond ideas, kind of beyond what she had done, what is usually done in the field. And I would say that those thoughts, I'm not the public financial management guy, but we usually have one from the other discipline to complement the inward-looking people. And one was thinking beyond what they usually think in that field, and that was good. I'm quite sure that she was wrong in many things, that it's impossible, but it was a kind of a sign to us that this person thinks beyond what is known, and most likely she's the one who will generate research funding, because she can offer something surprising. And that was the small thing that differentiated her from the rest of the pack. And this is why practicing this kind of thought experiments can be important, but of course it's difficult. But it shouldn't be difficult or easy. It should be something you just do if you want to do, or you do it without realizing it. I have short conversations with my wife on weekly basis. Are you watching the movie? On weekly or almost daily basis. Are you watching? And it usually goes like, are you watching the movie? What? Are you here? Yeah, of course. Are you working? No. And it's true. I'm not working. It's just the idea came to my mind, and it comes from elsewhere. I'm not thinking that I heard the brilliant presentation by Markus Grillitz. But it's something that is connecting the dots without me thinking. This is what I'm talking about, that you can cultivate it, learn it, and I think that most of the senior scholars are doing it. Long time ago, I had a longer conversation with Phil Cook, the kind of a father of regional innovation studies. We were in Sweden, traveling from somewhere to somewhere, some chirping to other chirping, I guess. Jönköping, Linköping, Norrköping, whatever. And this is what he told me, that I don't go to conferences. I don't read the journals, because I know it. But if there's something surprising, I will start learning and going to conferences, but instead, the inspiration is somewhere else. That's a bit scary, I have to say, that you feel that. I think we have to be careful of that. And the stage you ask, that's really crucial. When I got interested in place-based leadership that we didn't label that. That's the English-speaking people version of it. We had a better version of it. But for Finns in Finland, of course, no, not internationally, you have to adjust yourself. When I started talking about it in our PhD seminars, the PhD students of that time, they were a little bit, scared, or should we start going to management conferences, publish in management journals? We don't want to learn a new discipline. No. We will publish in regional studies, regional science, regional studies, regional science, that didn't exist at that time, environment and planning, that the journals we publish are the core journals of our field. The conferences we go are regional studies and blah, 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 but we get insight from the other fields, and they were quite relieved because they were worried about learning new people, new rules, etc. And sometimes we do things that have been done in leadership studies long time ago. But again, we do some things that they have not yet done, and that kind of cross-disciplinary learning is important, especially through journal, but the stage is extremely important. When I did my PhD, I made the mistake that I went to planning, ESOP, Association for European Schools of Planning conferences, regional studies conferences, all sorts of conferences, and then I realized that I'm totally confused, I know nobody, and I have no community to talk to because it's always new people, always new way of presenting things. But from planning studies, I learned that you can study plans as arenas of conflict. That comes from Patsy Healy from Newcastle. And that was very different from classical strategic planning in regional development. And that kind of insight may take you to see things a little differently, and then you start also asking new kind of questions. And it was good to go to planning studies conferences, but then I chose regional studies. I have a lot of notes, but thanks for excellent comments. And it's difficult, it's fun, and the stage is that was crucial point. You have to choose your arenas. I'm not after a revolution of regional studies. I'm not saying that we should reinvent the discipline of our universities. I'm more in a personal gain mode here. You can learn by yourself something to differentiate yourself from the rest of the pack. Nobody changes this community. It is evolving, it may change. And it is now different from 1998, because then it was 80% British.
Yeah.
And it was like in Bilbao, it was all British conference, and they all tapped each other's back, and I, what do I do here? I'm still here. Okay, thanks. Let's talk more about later.
Okay, we got 6 minutes left, and I have seen that we have many senior people here. Anybody want to say something? I think Q&A is too tedious and boring, right? And let the people free to speak. Okay, Robert, you first.
I was a bit surprised about this Nordic countries being consensus societies. You emphasize that a lot in Sweden and Finland, but at the same time, the concept of change agency has been mostly studied in Nordic countries.
Yeah, That's what we need.
I want to make. Another thing is you contrasted Turku with Tampere, so this contrast cries for an explanation with regard to change agency and place leadership. Why are the differences?
First of all, don't take my remarks as empirical evidence. Okay. They're more like highlights and try to highlight. But I would say, why do we study so much change agency in the Nordic countries is that we need it, because the systems are quite rigid. Yeah. That's one thing. Yeah. The other thing is that I would say that in the all Nordic countries, academics are very close to policy making. We know those people, we work with them, we consult them, we have conversations with them over a cup of coffee. We know things that usually the British don't even ask. Because we know the system, we know the people, and that opens new kind of questions. And for several years I struggled in conferences because nobody understood what I was talking about because of that. You have to scale down or up. And I like your Manchester comment. I have started when reviewing papers, and if there is somebody from Manchester just referring it, I write something that everybody must know what is Manchester, but you should explain it to those people who don't know, just to annoy them a bit. Because it's a bit arrogant to think that everybody knows your place you are studying.
Yeah.
We never do that, but Englishmen always do that. And then I want just add few sentences just for us who don't know that there is a city called Manchester. But yeah, but that's the answer to change agency. We are so close to it that we start studying very micro things also. What we have been doing is to upscale it a little bit. We went very detailed things earlier. But what we have been lately doing with Markus Grillitz is to link agencies to structures. Because otherwise you start studying what they say in the meetings. We could do that also, but that's irrelevant if you think structural change. And as I said, we need change. We take the consensual part as an
one more question
experience evidence.
Yeah. 3 minutes. Any comment or question? Angel? Okay, Kong Hui-Wen.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Markku. I've also been reading this book on undone science. So there's a lot of research that is not being done, or that's in your word, like questions not being picked up because they are filled out, and that's exactly what is happening. But I think that's not my question, but more like, so for you, would you be more interested in studying those phenomena that are sort of not being picked up, or would you actually be more interested in studying actually the, let's say, the mechanisms behind those things?
But that's what we do. We study the mechanism behind these things, but we do it by studying leadership or agency. So basically it all should contribute to understanding the causal powers in play. And then we need to be realistic. I just remembered one of the presidents of our university, let's say 15 years ago, who said that everybody talks about research as creative and innovative. The professors he knows are usually having 1 or 2 ideas in 30 years. And then they are trying to chase after that idea, prove it, refine it, get the other people's interested in. Yes, that's true.
Okay, final question.
No, I was going to finish with exactly that anecdote. Exactly that.
Yeah, okay.
That a very senior colleague told me that most careers are built on 1 or 2 ideas, and I have 0. And this was a person with 20,000.
But you are not talking about yourself.
And, not myself.
Yes, yeah.
No. Yeah. I have several, but no.
That can be a problem if you have several ideas.
Thank you. I think in order to keep in time that we are only 1 minute left, so let me put it simple. Thank you very much to all the audience, particularly a few people sitting in the chair over there, which is make me so exciting that encouraged me to host this kind of event next year. And also welcome the young scholar who want to be the discussion or respondent next year. Just email me, let me know. I will give you priority to it. And the most important thing is that different from the lecture yesterday, the lecture today, Markku, will become a paper in regional study and regional science soon, right? So it's not like
I wonder how that will come about.
Whenever you like, you just can write out what you have said today alongside with the PPT. I make sure that you will get approved. Well, this is the privilege of EIC, right? Somebody have told me that I can use this right in certain kind of particular circumstance. So I got it. So, and yes, Markku's paper will be the 4th paper in the regional future section, which is a very special section just specifically aimed to publish the paper like this one. So the first one is developed by Professor He Fei from Peking University. The second one is Henry Young here. And the third one I can tell you because still under review. So the 4th one would be Markku. So thank you very much again for everybody. Selfies together with everybody. Yeah. This is what I learned from Henry.